The roar of the crowd pulsed through the arena like a living thing. Sergeant Kalen Vance struggled to center himself as he was pushed into the blazing lights of the Xylos combat pit. His mind felt fractured, memories surfacing and submerging like debris in turbulent water. How long had he been a prisoner? Weeks? Months? Since the scout ship had vanished, time had become meaningless. Kalen squinted against the harsh illumination, his body aching from malnourishment and the series of conditioning sessions the Xylosian guards euphemistically called training. His once muscular frame had grown leaner, harder but weaker too. The arena stretching before him was a perfect circle of packed crimson soil, surrounded by rising tiers of spectators. Thousands of Xylosians chittering and clicking in excitement. Fragments of memory flashed through his mind. Tactical training seminars back on Earth, combat drills that now seemed like they'd happened to someone else. He remembered moving through simulated environments with practiced precision, but couldn't recall who had taught him or why his reflexes seemed unnaturally sharp despite his weakened state. A hush fell over the crowd. Kalen sensed the change before he saw the cause. A figure stepping through an ornate archway on the opposite side of the arena. Commander Lyranaya, champion of the Xylos arena, strode confidently toward the center pit. She moved with a predator's grace, her limbs flowing with a liquid precision that reminded Kalen of Earth's big cats. Her skin was a deep azure with iridescent markings that pulsed subtly with bioluminescence, brighter at her temples and along her spine, indicators of her high rank in Xylosian society. Her face was striking, angular features framed by a crest of rigid, spine-like appendages that currently glowed a confident blue-green. She wore form-fitting armor of some composite material that caught the light like polished obsidian, accentuating her athletic build. The crowd erupted at her entrance. She raised her arms, drinking in their adoration, her markings flashing brighter in obvious pleasure. In her right hand, she held what appeared to be a rod of dull metal, until she activated it with a flick of her wrist. Energy crackled along its length, extending into a glowing glaive nearly 2 meters long, its edge humming with contained power. Kalen had seen what those energy weapons could do. The thought sent a cold shiver down his spine. Lyranaya circled him, the way a predator circles wounded prey. "They've given me a human today," she called out, her voice amplified for the audience. "How disappointing. You won't last a minute against me, human." The crowd roared in approval at her mockery. "Such primitive physiology," she continued, prowling closer. "No natural defenses, no genetic enhancements, no integrated weaponry. Just soft skin and dull reflexes." She spun her glaive in a dazzling display of control, ending with the blade hovering inches from Kalen's throat. "I'll try to make this entertaining, at least." Kalen remained silent, his eyes tracking her movements while his mind reached desperately for the tactical training buried somewhere in his fragmented memory. The Xylosians had given him nothing, no weapon, no armor. Just a simple tunic and trousers of some rough material. A tone sounded, indicating the beginning of combat. Lyranaya backed away, deliberately toying with him. She executed a lazy feint, expecting him to flinch or back away in fear. When he didn't, her expression shifted minutely, first surprise, then annoyance. "Perhaps you don't understand your situation, human," she hissed, executing a more aggressive flourish with the glaive. "You are here to die for our entertainment. The longer you amuse us, the more merciful your end." Kalen's gaze darted around the arena. His eyes settled on a small metal shard half buried in the dirt, likely debris from a previous match. Something deep in his training clicked into place. A plan formed, instinctive and immediate. Lyranaya lunged, clearly intending a superficial wound to start the spectacle. Kalen moved purely on instinct. He pivoted, dropping lower than she anticipated. Her glaive whispered through the air where his chest had been a moment before. In the same fluid motion, he scooped up the metal shard and, as her momentum carried her past him, struck with precision at the junction of her weapon's handle and its energy projector. There was a sharp crack and a shower of sparks. The energy field destabilized instantly, sending feedback through the weapon systems. Lyranaya cried out in shock as the glaive sputtered and died, its power core overloading. She was forced to drop it as it began to smoke and pulse with dangerous energy. The arena fell utterly silent. Lyranaya stared at her damaged weapon, then at Kalen, her bioluminescent markings flashing from confident blue to alarmed orange. In those few seconds, her expression cycled through disbelief, humiliation, and finally rage. Her reputation, built on countless victories, threatened to crumble in an instant because of this supposedly inferior creature. Before either combatant could make another move, arena guards poured from multiple entrances. The lead guard slammed a control on his wrist, and an announcement thundered through the speakers. Combat suspended. Irregular conditions detected. The match is nullified. 6 guards surrounded Kalen. Shot prods extended. For more approached Lyranaya, who stood rigidly, her markings now pulsing in angry crimson. The crowd silence had transformed into a cacophony of outrage and confusion. Restrained human, a guard captain barked, and escort Commander Lyranaya to the holding chambers for assessment. I need no escort, Lyranaya snarled, but the guards moved forward regardless. As Kalen was seized and dragged toward one of the arena exits, he caught a final glimpse of Lyranaya. Despite the rage evident in her posture, there was something else in her eyes as she looked at him, a flicker of genuine curiosity. Then rough hands shoved him into a dark corridor, and the roar of the confused crowd faded behind him. The cell they threw him into was barely larger than a storage closet. A single light panel in the ceiling cast everything in harsh white illumination. Kalen sat on the hard bench, examining the cuts on his palms from the metal shard. What had happened out there? How had he known exactly where to strike the weapon? More memories surfaced as he sat in stillness. Training sessions in a sterile facility. Instructions on alien weapon systems. Combat simulations against non-human opponents. This wasn't standard military training. This was specialized preparation. But for what? His mission on the scout ship had been classified as first contact reconnaissance. Why would a reconnaissance officer need advanced combat training against specific alien technologies? A distant boom interrupted his thoughts, followed by the wail of alarms. The light in his cell flickered, then went red. Emergency protocols. Something was happening. Several corridors away, Lyranaya paced her considerably more comfortable detention chamber. Unlike the human, she wasn't considered a prisoner, merely temporarily detained pending review by the Gaming Commission. Her damaged weapon lay on an examination table, evidence of her unprecedented humiliation. The door to her chamber remained unlocked. She was, after all, still a commander and champion. But leaving before formal dismissal would be an admission of further weakness. So she waited, imagining all the ways she would make the humans suffer when they inevitably rematched. Her contemplation of vengeance was interrupted by the same explosion that Kalen had felt. Her chamber lights shifted to emergency mode, and she heard shouting in the corridor outside. She stepped to the door, opening it to witness chaos. Guards ran past, weapons drawn. One of them noticed her. "Commander, return to your chamber immediately. Rebel insurgents have breached the lower levels." Rebels. The Xylosian underclass and their alien sympathizers had been growing bolder, but an attack on the arena complex itself was unprecedented. Before she could respond, another explosion rocked the facility, closer this time. The guard was thrown against the wall by the concussion wave. Lyranaya made a split-second decision. She grabbed the guard's sidearm, a standard plasma pistol, and moved purposefully down the corridor. Without her ceremonial glaive, she felt almost naked, but the familiar weight of the pistol was reassuring. If rebels were loose in the complex, standing still was suicide. She navigated the back corridors of the arena complex with practiced familiarity, avoiding the main thoroughfares where fighting would be heaviest. Her plan was simple. Reach the command center, report to her superiors, join the defense. Restore her standing through decisive action. As she rounded a corner, She came face to face with what appeared to be a maintenance worker, a member of a squat, amphibian-like species the Xylosians use for technical labor. The worker squeaked in alarm. Then recognition flashed in its bulbous eyes. "Champion, they hunt for you," it croaked in broken Xylosian language. "Who hunts for me?" Lyranaya demanded, raising the pistol. "Varric's people," the worker said, backing away nervously. "Say you disgrace Arena. Say human trick arranged by you. They come to execute." Varric, her chief rival on the gaming commission, who had long sought to discredit her. So he was using the chaos of a rebel attack to eliminate her? The coward couldn't even face her directly. Another explosion, much closer now. The maintenance worker fled, disappearing down a service tunnel. Lyranaya changed course. The command center would be suicide if Varric had already spread his lies. She needed to reach the lower levels, find an exit route through the underground city. Meanwhile, Kalen's cell door slid open during a power fluctuation. The corridor outside was dark, emergency lighting providing only minimal illumination. He stepped out cautiously, hearing distant weapons fire and shouting. Whatever was happening provided his best chance of escape, perhaps his only chance. He moved quietly through the detention block, encountering no guards. They had apparently been called to defend more important areas. At an intersection, he found a dead guard, apparently caught in crossfire. Kalen knelt and claimed the guard's weapon, a short energy baton that hummed to life at his touch. Following signs in the Xylosian language that he'd learned to partially decipher during his captivity, he made his way toward what he hoped was an exit route. Instead, he found himself in a larger chamber that appeared to be a security hub. Screens on the wall showed different sections of the complex, many displaying scenes of combat between arena guards and what appear to be rebels. A mix of Xylosians in civilian clothing and various alien species. Movement caught his eye. He spun, energy baton raised, to find himself facing Lyranaya, her plasma pistol aimed directly at his head. "You," she hissed, her markings flashing with malice. "You." He returned evenly, not lowering his weapon. They stood frozen in a standoff, each measuring the other. Kalen noticed her ceremonial glaive was missing, replaced by the more practical pistol. Lyranaya observed the way he held the energy baton, not with the desperation of a fleeing prisoner, but with the practiced stance of a trained combatant. Before either could speak again, the chamber's main door burst open. 3 Xylosians in elite guard armor stormed in, weapons raised. "There she is," one shouted. Commander Varric orders her immediate execution for conspiracy and treason. In the split second of confusion, Kalen acted without thinking. He hurled himself sideways, crashing into Lyranaya and sending them both tumbling behind a console as plasma, fire, scorched the wall where they had been standing. "What are you doing?" she snarled as they took cover. "Saving both our lives," he replied, peering around the edge of the console. "Those aren't rebels. They're wearing elite guard insignia. And they're not here for me." Another volley of plasma, fire forced them deeper into cover. The console they hid behind wouldn't withstand sustained fire for long. "There's a service tunnel," Lyranaya said grudgingly, nodding toward a small hatch in the floor near the back wall. "If we can reach it, we'll need a distraction," Kalen finished. He examined the security hub, noting the power distribution panel. "Cover me." Before she could protest, he darted from cover toward the panel. Lyranaya, seemingly on instinct, provided covering fire, forcing the elite guards to duck behind the doorway. Kalen reached the panel and, with surprising technical knowledge, ripped open the access hatch and yanked out several key components. The room plunged into darkness as the security systems went offline. Emergency lighting kicked in seconds later, but by then, Kalen had made it back to Lyranaya's position. "Now," he whispered. They raced for the service hatch, Lyranaya firing blindly toward the door to keep the guards' heads down. Kalen wrenched the hatch open, and they both dropped into the narrow maintenance tunnel below. Lyranaya sealed the hatch behind them just as the guards rushed the position. The tunnel was barely tall enough to crouch in, lit only by sparse emergency lights that cast everything in a sickly red glow. It smelled of machine oil and damp. "This way," Lyranaya said, taking the lead. These tunnels run throughout the complex. We can reach the underground city. Why are you helping me? Kalen asked as they moved. I'm not helping you, human, she replied coldly. You're following me because we temporarily face the same enemy. Once we're clear of the complex, we part ways, assuming I don't kill you myself. Kalen didn't argue. For now, their interests aligned, and that was enough. They navigated the claustrophobic service tunnels for what felt like hours, but was likely only 20 minutes. Twice they had to hide as maintenance workers or security patrols passed nearby access points. Eventually, the tunnels widened and joined larger infrastructure channels. The clean, maintained systems of the arena complex gradually gave way to older, more neglected utility corridors. We're entering the city underbelly, Lyranaya explained in a hushed tone. The part of Xylos that the high governance pretends doesn't exist. Stay close. There are worse things than arena guards down here. The underbelly of Xylos City was a chaotic maze of abandoned infrastructure, repurposed ancient tunnels, and makeshift dwellings carved into the very bedrock of the planet. Dim bioluminescent fungi provided most of the illumination, supplemented by the occasional flickering electric light or chemical lantern. The air was thick with moisture and the mingled scents of cooking fires, waste, and the various biological emissions of a dozen different species. Lyranaya led them through narrow passages where they had to proceed single file, her hand often raised in warning when they approached populated areas. Most of the denizens they glimpsed were non-Xylosians, species conquered or assimilated into the empire as laborers, servants, or simply forgotten outcasts. I didn't know this existed, Kalen murmured as they paused in a relatively secure alcove. The propaganda they showed us prisoners depicted Xylos as a technological paradise. For the ruling castes, it is, Lyranaya replied, checking the charge on her plasma pistol. What you see here is the reality for most, the foundation upon which our paradise is built. Something in her tone made Kalen look at her more carefully. You don't sound particularly proud of it. Her bioluminescent markings flickered with complex emotions. Pride is reserved for achievements, not accidents of birth. I earned my rank through combat prowess, not hereditary privilege. She glanced at him, though I suppose that means little to you after what happened in the arena. I got lucky, Kalen said, though he didn't entirely believe it. The way he had disabled her weapon had felt too practiced, too precise. No, she said flatly. Luck had nothing to do with it. You knew exactly where to strike. Her eyes narrowed. Were you really human? A simple reconnaissance officer doesn't move like you do. Before he could answer, sounds of pursuit echoed from the tunnel they had just navigated. The heavy footfalls of combat boots and the distinctive electronic chirp of Xylosian military comms. They're tracking us, Lyranaya hissed. We need to move faster. They plunged deeper into the Undercity, no longer able to proceed with caution. Several times they stumbled into the territories of local gangs or encampments, causing momentary chaos as they pushed through. At one point, they ran directly into a marketplace of sorts, a wider chamber where various species bartered for goods of questionable origin. Their sudden appearance, particularly Lyranaya with her distinctive champion's markings, caused an immediate stir. Arena champion, someone shouted in the trading pigeon common to the Undercity. Bounty on her head. Suddenly, they were running again, pursued not only by official forces, but by opportunistic bounty hunters and gang members, hoping to claim whatever reward had been offered. Plasma bolts sizzled past them, impacting the ancient stone walls. In here, Kalen yanked Lyranaya into a narrow side passage just wide enough for them to squeeze through. They emerged into what appeared to be an abandoned dwelling. A small cave expanded and reinforced with scavenged materials. The entrance behind them was partially concealed by hanging fabricage that resembled industrial waste, but had clearly been arranged deliberately. They crouched in silence, listening as their pursuers rushed past the hidden entrance. When the sounds faded, Lyranaya slumped against the wall, clearly exhausted. A thin line of blue fluid, Xylosian blood, trickled from a wound on her upper arm. You're injured, Kalen observed. A grazing shot. Nothing serious. She examined the wound clinically. Though infection is a concern in these surroundings. Kalen searched the abandoned dwelling, finding a cache of basic supplies hidden in a recessed wall panel. Likely an emergency stash for the previous occupant. Among them was a canteen of water and what appeared to be a medical kit with unfamiliar contents. "Let me see that," he said, returning to her side with the supplies. She stiffened. "I don't need your help." "Probably not," he agreed. "But you might need that arm at full function if we're going to get out of this alive." After a moment of apparent internal struggle, she extended her arm. The wound wasn't deep, but the edges showed signs of beginning infection, a faint purplish glow characteristic of Xylosian immune response. Kalen examined the medical supplies, finding something that resembled a sanitizing agent and what he guessed was a sealing compound for wounds. With careful movements, he cleaned and sealed the injury. "Your technique is adequate," Lyranaya acknowledged grudgingly. "You have medical training as well." "Fragments," Kalen replied, repacking the medical kit. "Like everything else in my head. Basic field medicine is standard for Earth reconnaissance teams." They rested in silence for a while, each lost in thought. Eventually, Lyranaya spoke again. "We should eat something. Preserve our strength." She reached for a package of what looked like dried meat from the supply cache. After examining it carefully, she broke it in half and offered a portion to Kalen. This should be compatible with human physiology. He accepted the food with a nod of thanks. It tasted like leather, seasoned with metal shavings, but he forced himself to eat methodically. "You're handling this well, for someone who was a prisoner until a few hours ago," Lyranaya observed. Kalen shrugged. "Adaptability is essential for survival. Something tells me you understand that principle." Indeed, her markings shifted to a thoughtful blue. "You mentioned fragments in your head. Your memories are damaged." "Not damaged. Compartmentalized, I think. Since my capture, I've been experiencing flashes. Training I don't remember receiving. Knowledge I shouldn't have." He looked at his hands, remembering how they had moved with such certainty when disabling her weapon. "I was part of a first contact team, but my reactions are those of a combat specialist." Lyranaya studied him with renewed interest. "The High Governance has programs for creating sleeper agents, warriors with suppressed combat programming who appear as diplomats or merchants until activated. Earth doesn't have technology like that," Kalen said, but doubt crept into his voice. "Are you certain?" she asked. "Or is that simply what you were permitted to remember?" The question hung in the air between them, disturbing in its implications. Before they could discuss it further, distant shouting echoed through the walls. "They're conducting a systematic search," Lyranaya said, instantly alert. "We can't stay here." They gathered what supplies they could carry and slipped out of the hidden dwelling. Rather than returning to the main tunnels, Lyranaya led them deeper into a network of increasingly ancient passages. The constructed corridors eventually gave way to natural cave systems, occasionally interrupted by the crumbling remnants of ancient Xylosian construction. "These caverns predate modern Xylos," she explained as they navigated the twisting passages. "From before we became a spacefaring species. Few remember these routes exist." "How do you know them?" Kalen asked. She hesitated before answering. "My lineage includes scholars of ancient history, before I chose the warrior's path. Knowledge of all kinds has value." They emerged into a vast underground chamber where massive stone columns supported a ceiling lost in darkness above. Ancient carvings covered the columns, depicting primitive Xylosians hunting, building, and worshipping long-forgotten deities. "The Great Hall of Ancestors," Lyranaya whispered, her voice carrying the hint of reverence. Few living Xylosians have seen this place. As they crossed the enormous chamber, keeping to the shadows of the columns, Kalen felt a growing sense of unease. His fragmented training was triggering warning signals. He stopped abruptly, placing a hand on Lyranaya's arm. "Something's wrong," he murmured. "We're not alone." She froze, her own instincts confirming his suspicion. They pressed themselves against one of the massive columns, scanning the darkness. Movement flickered at the far edge of the chamber. A group of figures emerged from a side passage, the distinctive silhouettes of Xylosian elite guards, led by a taller figure in ornate armor. Varric, Lyranaya hissed, her markings dimming to near invisibility. He must have anticipated this route. How? Kalen whispered. He has access to the same historical archives as my family, she replied grimly. We need another way out. They retreated carefully, moving from column to column, but the acoustics of the chamber betrayed them. A small dislodged stone skittered across the floor, the sound amplified by the cavernous space. There! Varric's voice boomed. Secure the exits. Elite guards rushed to block the passages leading from the chamber. Plasma weapons powered up with an ominous hum. We're trapped, Lyranaya said, her voice tight with tension. Kalen's mind raced, scanning the chamber for options. His eyes settled on the far wall, where ancient stone had partially collapsed to reveal a narrow fissure. There, he pointed, natural cave formation. Might lead to the surface. It's too far, she said. We'd never make it across open ground. Not without a distraction. Kalen examined their surroundings more carefully, noting the ancient, brittle stalactites hanging from the sections of ceiling lowest to the ground. An idea formed, dangerous, potentially suicidal, but their only chance. I need your plasma pistol, he said. She stared at him. Why would I? Because I'm about to save your life. Again, he held her gaze steadily. Trust me. After a moment's hesitation, she handed him the weapon. What's your plan? When I give the signal, run for that fissure. Don't stop, don't look back. And you, I'll be right behind you. She didn't believe him. He could see it in her eyes, but she nodded anyway. Kalen adjusted the plasma pistol's settings, overriding the safety protocols to increase its power output. The weapon began to whine dangerously, its energy core glowing brighter than designed. Ready, he whispered. Ready. He took a deep breath, then stepped out from behind the column and fired 3 rapid shots at the stalactites hanging above Eric's position. The overcharged plasma bolts struck with devastating force. The ancient stone formation shattered, raining massive shards down onto the elite guards. Simultaneously, he hurled the overloading pistol toward another cluster of guards. Now, he shouted. Lyranaya sprinted for the fissure, moving with astonishing speed. Kalen followed, zigzagging to avoid the plasma bolts fired by guards who had escaped the falling debris. Behind them, the overloaded pistol detonated with a brilliant flash, temporarily blinding their pursuers. They reached the fissure just as order was being restored among the guards. The opening was narrower than it had appeared, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through single file. You first, Kalen insisted, positioning himself to cover their retreat. No, Lyranaya countered. I know these caves. Follow me and move exactly where I move. Some of these passages can be unstable. Without waiting for his agreement, she slipped into the fissure. Kalen glanced back at the approaching guards, then followed her into the darkness. The passage twisted upward through natural stone, occasionally so narrow they had to turn sideways to progress. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of pursuit, some of the smaller Xylosian guards attempting to follow. Lyranaya moved with confidence despite the near-total darkness, her bioluminescent markings providing just enough light to navigate by. How much further? Kalen asked as they squeezed through a particularly tight section. The surface should be close, she replied. These fissures formed during ancient seismic activity. Her explanation was cut short by a deep rumbling. The passage shook, and small stones rained down from above. They're using sonic disruptors, she hissed, trying to collapse the passage on us. The rumbling intensified. Larger chunks of rock began to fall. They increased their pace, ignoring the scrapes and bruises from rough stone as they pushed through ever narrower sections. Suddenly, Lyranaya stopped. Dead end. Kalen peered over her shoulder. The passage terminated in a wall of solid rock. There must be another way. No time. The rumbling was growing stronger, the passage increasingly unstable. The disruptors are breaking through the weak points in the stone. Kalen examined the dead and more carefully. The rock pattern is different here. This isn't natural. It's a collapse from a previous quake. He ran his hands over the stone's surface, feeling for weaknesses. If we could break through. Another violent tremor shook the passage. A large section of ceiling collapsed behind them, cutting off their retreat and narrowly missing crushing them. "We're running out of time," Lyranias said, her markings pulsing with alarm. Kalen continued examining the rock face, his fingers finding a small crevice. "There's airflow. Something's on the other side." He looked around for anything they could use as a tool, but found nothing. "We need to dig." They attacked the rock face with desperate energy, pulling away loose stones where they could find them. The passage continued to shake around them, more debris falling with each tremor. Their progress was agonizingly slow. "It's not enough," Lyranias said after several minutes of effort. They had created a small opening, but nowhere near large enough to pass through. Another violent shake sent them both stumbling. "The whole passage is going to collapse any moment." Kalen stared at the inadequate hole they had created, then at Lyranias. A decision crystallized in his mind. "Get as close to the opening as you can," he instructed. "Cover your head." "What are you?" "Just do it," she complied, pressing herself against the rock face near their excavation. Kalen positioned himself with his back to the wall opposite the hole, bracing his legs against the stone. "What happens next," he said grimly, "will either save us or kill us both." Before she could respond, he closed his eyes, focusing inward. Something was there, buried deep in his compartmentalized memories. A training protocol, a physical enhancement, something his conscious mind couldn't fully access but his body remembered. The passage shook violently again. Rocks crashed down around them. With a shout that was half pain and half release, Kalen drove his legs against the wall with inhuman force. Something in his muscles and tendons responded beyond normal human capacity, channeling strength that shouldn't have been possible. The weakened rock face shattered. Daylight flooded in through a jagged, opening torn in the stone. Fresh air rushed into the collapsing passage. "Go!" Kalen gasped, his body suddenly trembling from the enormous exertion. Lyranias stared at him in shock for a split second, then scrambled through the opening. Kalen followed, his movements now clumsy and uncoordinated. They emerged onto a narrow ledge on the side of a cliff face, just as the passage behind them collapsed completely in a cloud of dust and debris. They lay there panting, covered in stone dust and blood from numerous small cuts, as the reality of their survival slowly sank in. The ledge they had emerged onto was part of a much larger cliff face that formed one boundary of Xylo City. Below them stretched the wild, untamed landscape of the planet, a vast expanse of alien forest interspersed with glittering lakes and strange rock formations. "How did you do that?" Lyranias finally asked, staring at Kalen with a mixture of awe and suspicion. No unmodified human could have broken through solid rock. Kalen examined his hands, which were scraped raw but already showing signs of accelerated healing. "I told you, there are things in my head I don't remember learning. Apparently, there are things in my body I don't remember receiving either. You're augmented," she stated. "Military-grade muscle and skeletal enhancements, at minimum." Apparently. He looked out at the wild landscape. Which begs the question, what was I really sent to Xylos for? Lyranias' markings shifted to a contemplative blue. "Whatever it was, Varric and his allies on the Gaming Commission will stop at nothing to find you now. You're evidence of something they want kept hidden, and you're a liability who knows too much." Kalen got unsteadily to his feet, wincing at the pain in his overtaxed muscles. "We need to keep moving." They navigated the narrow ledge carefully, following it along the cliff face until they found a series of natural handholds leading downward. The descent was treacherous, but both were skilled climbers, Kalen drawing on his mysterious training, Lyranias on her natural Xylosian agility. By the time they reached the forest floor, the twin suns of Xylos were setting, casting long purple shadows across the landscape. "We should find shelter before dark," Lyranias suggested, scanning the forest edge. "Nocturnal predators in the outer wilds are not to be taken lightly." They moved into the forest, alert for danger. The alien vegetation grew more densely as they progressed. Towering structures resembling trees, but with translucent, membrane-like leaves that captured the fading sunlight. Bioluminescent fungi, similar to those in the Undercity, grew in patches, providing navigational markers in the gathering darkness. After about an hour, they discovered what appeared to be a seasonal watercourse, currently dry but lined with smooth stones and offering a clear path through the dense vegetation. Following it led them to a small grotto where the stream had once carved out a shallow cave beneath the roots of a massive, tree-like organism. "This will do for the night," Lyronaya declared, examining the grotto carefully for signs of animal habitation. Kaelin collected dry vegetable matter for a small fire, which Lyronaya lit using a spark-generating device she had kept concealed in her armor. The faint illumination and warmth provided a much-needed sense of security as darkness fell completely. They treated their various injuries with the remaining medical supplies from the Undercity cache. Lyronaya's wound had begun healing already, the bluish glow of her immune response having contained any infection. Kaelin's numerous cuts and abrasions were also showing remarkable healing, further evidence of whatever enhancements had been done to him. "You should rest," Lyronaya said as she finished applying sealing compound to a particularly deep cut on his forearm. "Your body needs to recover from whatever you did back there. What about you? Xylosians require less sleep than humans. I'll keep watch for the first half of the night." Too exhausted to argue, Kaelin settled onto a relatively comfortable spot near the fire. Despite his fatigue, sleep didn't come immediately. He found himself studying Lyronaya as she sat vigilant at the mouth of their small shelter, her profile illuminated by firelight, her markings now a calm, deep blue. "Why did you help me?" he asked softly. "Back in the Great Hall, you could have left me behind. Use me as a distraction to save yourself." Lyronaya remained silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the alien forest beyond their shelter. Her bioluminescent markings shifted subtly, cycling through colors that Kaelin couldn't interpret. "Honor," she finally said. "We fought as equals in the arena. You earned respect when you disabled my weapon. To abandon you would dishonor that moment. Is honor really that important when your own people are trying to kill you? Especially then." She turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "When everything else is stripped away, position, status, the trappings of civilization, honor is what remains. It defines us when nothing else can." Kaelin considered this. "On Earth, we might call that integrity, being true to yourself, even when it's difficult. A reasonable translation." Her markings brightened slightly. "Rest now, human. Tomorrow will bring new challenges." Despite his lingering questions, exhaustion finally claimed him. He drifted into uneasy sleep filled with fractured dreams, sterile laboratories, faceless doctors performing procedures, combat drills against simulated alien opponents with familiar Xylosian features. He woke suddenly to Lyronaya's hand on his shoulder. The fire had burned down to embers, and the forest beyond their shelter was alive with bioluminescence, pulsing patterns of light that moved through the vegetation like ghostly signals. "Your turn to watch," she said quietly. "Wake me at the first sign of trouble." They exchanged positions, Kaelin taking up station at the entrance to their small cave, while Lyronaya settled into the spot he had vacated. Within minutes, her breathing had slowed, her markings dimming to a barely perceptible glow. The night passed without incident. As dawn approached, the twin suns of Xylos painted the horizon with brilliant copper and gold. Kaelin woke Lyronaya, who transitioned instantly from sleep to full alertness, another trait of her species. "We need to find water," she said, gathering their meager supplies, "and decide where we're going. Is there anywhere on this planet where neither of us would be hunted?" Kaelin asked. "Perhaps." She led the way out of their shelter. "There are independent settlements in the outer wilds, trading outposts, and mining communities outside high governance control. They primarily deal with off-worlders. Smugglers and outlaws, you mean? Freedom operators with flexible interpretations of Xylosian law," she corrected with what might have been a hint of humor. "Many are former arena champions who purchased their autonomy. You can do that. With sufficient victories and public acclaim, Yes. I was. She hesitated, 2 seasons away from having enough credit for independence rights. They followed the dry stream bed, reasoning it would eventually lead to water. As they walked, the alien forest grew less dense, giving way to rolling plains covered in silver-blue vegetation that rippled like liquid in the morning breeze. You said there were settlements, Kalen prompted. How far? The nearest would be Crimson Outpost, perhaps 3 days' journey east. She pointed toward where one of the suns was rising. It's a mining community extracting geothermal minerals from the volcanic region beyond these plains. And they'd accept a disgraced champion and an escaped human prisoner. They accept anyone with skills or resources to trade. She glanced at him appraisingly. Your combat abilities and whatever other enhancements you possess would be valuable, as would my knowledge of Xylosian security protocols. They traveled in companionable silence for several hours, eventually finding a small stream running clear and cool through a rocky channel. After testing it for compatibility with their respective physiologies, they drank deeply and refilled the canteen from their salvage supplies. As Lyranaya knelt by the stream, something caught Kalen's attention, a flicker of movement on the ridge above them. He reacted instantly, pulling her away from the exposed position just as a plasma bolt struck the water where she had been moments before. Trackers, she hissed, scrambling for cover behind a large boulder. Kalen joined her, scanning the ridge. Elite guards? No, she said grimly. Worse, guild hunters. 3 figures appeared on the ridgeline, Xylosians in lightweight armor designed for wilderness pursuit. They moved with predatory grace, spreading out to establish firing positions. Professional bounty hunters, Lyranaya explained quickly. Varric must have activated a guild contract. Options? Kalen asked, assessing their situation. They were pinned down with minimal cover between them and the open plains. Running is suicide, she said. They have targeting enhancements and long-range weapons. So we fight. Kalen's mind raced through tactical possibilities. How good are they in close combat? Trained, but they prefer distance. Their armor is lighter than elite guards, designed for mobility, not protection. Kalen nodded, a plan forming. We need to separate them. Draw them down one at a time. Ow! I'll appear to be injured. You'll seem to abandon me. When the first one comes to secure me, I'll take him. You circle around and deal with the others when they respond. Lyranaya's markings flashed with concern. That's incredibly risky. Got a better idea? After a moment's hesitation, she shook her head. Do it. They enacted their plans swiftly. Lyranaya darted from cover, zigzagging to avoid plasma fire as she headed for a denser patch of vegetation. Kalen waited until she was clear, then emerged limping heavily, one arm hanging useless at his side, apparently trying to follow but failing. He collapsed dramatically halfway to the vegetation. The hunters conferred briefly, then one began descending the ridge while the others maintained covering positions. Kalen lay motionless, regulating his breathing, gathering his strength. He could hear the hunter approaching cautiously, the slight crunch of boots on rocky soil. Subject is down, the hunter reported in Xylosian. Moving to secure. The footsteps came closer. Kalen remained perfectly still until he sensed the hunter standing directly over him, plasma rifle aimed at his head. Conscious but incapacitated, the hunter continued. Proceeding with. Kalen exploded into motion. Accessing the same enhanced strength he had used to break through the rock wall, he swept the hunter's legs while simultaneously grabbing the rifle barrel. The Xylosian went down hard, the weapon discharging harmlessly into the air. Before the hunter could recover, Kalen delivered a precise strike to a nerve cluster at the base of the Xylosian's skull, knowledge from his mysterious training activating automatically. The hunter went limp, unconscious but alive. On the ridge, the other hunters reacted immediately, firing a barrage of plasma bolts that forced Kalen back into cover. He dragged the unconscious hunter with him, quickly stripping him of weapons and communication devices. True to the plan, Lyranaya had circled through the vegetation. She emerged behind the second hunter, moving with silent efficiency. A quick application of a neural disruptor, taken from the hunter Kalen had disabled, rendered her target unconscious before he could alert his remaining companion. The third hunter, realizing the situation had changed dramatically, tried to retreat, but found himself caught between Kalen advancing up one side of the ridge and Lyranaya approaching from the flank. His plasma rifle swung between the two targets, unable to cover both. "Surrender," Lyranaya called out in Xylosian. "You're outmatched." The hunter's response was to fire at her. She dodged with remarkable agility, the plasma bolt passing harmlessly overhead. Before he could fire again, Kalen closed the distance and engaged him directly. The fight was brief but intense. The hunter was skilled, but Kalen moved with fluid precision that belied his human appearance. Each strike connected with devastating effect, targeting joints and vulnerable points in the lightweight armor. Within moments, the hunter lay unconscious alongside his companions. "You fight like a Nightshade operative," Lyranaya observed as they collected the hunter's weapons and supplies. "That's specialized training even among our military elite. Is that significant?" Kalen asked, securing a plasma rifle and power cells. Nightshade protocols were developed for covert planetary infiltration and high-value target elimination. She gave him a meaningful look. "They're not taught to conventional forces, even special operations." The implication hung in the air between them. Whatever Kalen had been sent to Xylos for, it hadn't been simple reconnaissance. They bound the unconscious hunters with their own restraints and disabled their communication equipment. The bounty hunters would eventually free themselves, but it would give Kalen and Lyranaya valuable time to distance themselves. "We need to change course," Lyranaya said as they prepared to move out. "They'll have reported our last position before attacking." "Suggestions?" She considered for a moment. "South. There's a seasonal river basin that will be difficult to track through. Beyond that lies the Ashlands, a region of volcanic activity and mineral deposits. Challenging terrain, but it could lead us to Crimson outposts from a direction they won't expect." They traveled swiftly, pushing themselves to cover as much ground as possible before the hunters recovered. By midday, they reached the river basin Lyranaya had mentioned, a vast expanse of dry, cracked earth interspersed with shallow pools of standing water. The ground was baked hard by the twin suns, making it difficult to leave tracks. As they picked their way across the basin, Kalen found himself increasingly drawn to his companion. Lyranaya moved with natural grace and confidence, her actions decisive but measured. The arrogance she had displayed in the arena had been replaced by a focused competence that commanded respect. "You're different than I expected," he admitted during a brief rest in the shadow of a towering rock formation. "How so?" She was checking one of the plasma rifles, adjusting its power configuration with practiced ease. "In the arena, you seemed cruel, contemptuous." She didn't look up from her work. "I was what I needed to be. The arena demands a certain persona from its champions. The crowd wants spectacle, not just combat. And the real Lyranaya," she finished her adjustments and finally met his gaze, "is still determining who that is, now that everything she built has been taken away." The honesty of her answer surprised him. "I understand that feeling. Waking up with parts of yourself missing, questioning your purpose. Perhaps we're not so different after all. Human." "Kalen," he said. "My name is Kalen Vance." "Kalen," she repeated, her Xylosian pronunciation giving the name a musical quality. A strong name. They continued their journey through the basin and into increasingly rugged terrain. By evening, the landscape had transformed dramatically. The ground rose in sharp, irregular formations, split by deep fissures from which thin trails of vapor escaped. The air carried the acrid scent of minerals and heated stone. "The edge of the Ashlands," Lyranaya explained. "We'll need to proceed carefully here. The ground can be unstable, and there are geothermal vents that release toxic gases without warning." They found shelter for the night in a shallow cave formed by overlapping rock slabs. As darkness fell, the volcanic region came alive with eerie beauty. The fissures glowed with orange light from molten rock far below, and crystalline formations in the stone caught and amplified the radiance, creating patterns of light across the landscape. As they shared the last of their rations, Lyranaya studied Kalen with renewed curiosity. Your injuries are healing at an accelerated rate, she observed. Another enhancement? Kalen examined the cuts and abrasions that had already formed new skin. Apparently, though I don't remember receiving any of these modifications. Memory suppression is common for deep cover operatives, she said. It protects both the mission and the agent if captured. You seem to know a lot about covert operations for an arena champion. She was quiet for a moment, her markings shifting to a deeper, more guarded blue. Before the arena, I served in military intelligence. 5 cycles as a field operative before politics and family expectations pushed me toward the champion's path. You didn't want to be a champion? I wanted to serve Xylos in ways that mattered. The arena is spectacular, distraction for the masses. Her voice took on a bitter edge. I excelled at it because failure wasn't an option, not because it fulfilled me. Kalen absorbed this revelation. So that's why you know these wilderness routes. Why you understand covert protocols. Yes, she prodded their small fire with a stick. The irony is not lost on me. That my former life has become necessary for survival now, that my champion status has been stripped away. What will you do if we reach Crimson Outpost? He asked. Return to Xylos City eventually? Reclaim your position? She laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. That path is closed forever. Varric will have ensured my complete disgrace. Even if I could prove his treachery, the damage is done. Her markings rippled with complex emotions. No, if we survive this, I must find a new path. Perhaps off-world, where my skills could be valuable without the weight of Xylosian politics. As a mercenary? As a free agent, she corrected. There is a difference. They fell silent, each contemplating uncertain futures. Eventually, Lyranaya took first watch, and Kalen tried to sleep. His dreams were more coherent this time. Images of a briefing room on Earth, stern-faced military officials discussing the strategic importance of Xylos, a volunteer program for experimental enhancement. He woke with a clearer understanding of his situation, though many questions remained. The enhancement program had been voluntary, but the memory suppression had been part of the protocol, designed to allow operatives to integrate naturally into alien societies without unconscious tells that might reveal their true purpose. I remember more, he told Lyranaya, as they prepared to move out at first light. I was part of a special program. Military intelligence suspected Xylos was developing new weapons technology in violation of the Galactic Accord. The High Governance has always skirted the edges of the Accord, she acknowledged. But outright violation? That would risk sanctions from the Galactic Council, which is why they needed confirmation before making accusations. My team was sent to gather evidence, disguised as a standard diplomatic mission. And the enhancements? Insurance. In case things went wrong. He checked the plasma rifle they had taken from the hunters, which they clearly did, since I ended up in your arena. They set off into the heart of the Ashlands, navigating a treacherous landscape of sharp volcanic rock and hidden fissures. The heat grew more intense as they progressed, forcing them to ration their water carefully. Crystalline formations became more prevalent, strange, geometric growths that captured sunlight and refracted it in dazzling patterns. Geothermal minerals, Lyranaya explained when Kalen paused to examine one particularly beautiful formation. The basis of our advanced energy systems. This is what they mine at Crimson Outpost. By midday, they had made good progress through the difficult terrain. Lyranaya estimated they would reach the outpost by the following evening if they maintained their pace. They paused in the shadow of a towering rock spire to rest and rehydrate. The attack came without warning. A plasma bolt struck the rock beside Kalen's head, showering him with superheated fragments. They both dove for cover as more bolts impacted around them. Guild hunters again, Kalen called out, trying to locate the source of the fire. No, Lyranaya replied grimly. Elite guards, heavy weapons. She pointed to a ridge about 300 meters away, where 6 armored figures had established firing positions. Unlike the hunters' lightweight gear, These were full combat suits with enhanced vision systems and heavy plasma cannons. Varric is taking no chances, she said. Those are execution units, not capture teams. They were pinned down with minimal cover, vastly outgunned. The guards began a systematic approach, maintaining suppressing fire while advancing in tactical formation. We can't stay here, Kalen said, his enhanced vision picking out details of their approach. They're flanking us. Lyranaya scanned their surroundings desperately. There! She pointed to a deep fissure about 50 meters to their right. It might lead deeper into the cave systems. Or it might be a dead end, Kalen noted. We'd be trapped. Better than certain death here. She raised her plasma rifle. I'll provide covering fire. On my mark, run for the fissure. No! Kalen's voice was firm. You go first. I'll cover you. This is not the time for human chivalry. It's not chivalry. You know these caves. If that fissure leads somewhere, you're our best chance of navigating it. He checked the charge on his weapon. I'll be right behind you. She hesitated, then nodded sharply. Don't be heroic. 10 seconds of cover, then follow. Go. Lyranaya sprinted from cover as Kalen laid down rapid fire, targeting the lead guards. His enhanced strength allowed him to stabilize the rifle for accuracy despite its recoil. 2 guards dove for cover, temporarily halting the advance. True to her word, Lyranaya reached the fissure in seconds, sliding into its shadows. Kalen continued firing, emptying the weapon's charge pack to create maximum disruption. As soon as Lyranaya signaled her position, he prepared to follow. He made it halfway to the fissure when disaster struck. A plasma bolt caught him in the leg, searing through muscle and grazing bone. He stumbled but kept moving, dragging the injured limb. Behind him, the guards were advancing rapidly, sensing weakness. Lyranaya emerged from the fissure, plasma rifle raised. Keep moving, she shouted, providing covering fire that temporarily forced the guards back. Kalen reached the fissure and practically fell into it, pain shooting up his injured leg. Lyranaya pulled him deeper into the narrow passage as plasma bolts impacted the opening, melting rock and sending cascades of debris falling around them. Can you move? She asked urgently, examining his wound in the dim light filtering through the fissure entrance. Yes, he grunted, though the pain was intense. His enhanced physiology was already working to control the bleeding, but the damage was significant. The passage continues downward, she said. If we're lucky, it connects to larger cave systems. They moved as quickly as Kalen's injury would allow, descending deeper into the planet's crust. The narrow fissure eventually widened into a natural tunnel, its walls lined with the same crystalline formations they had seen on the surface, now glowing with faint internal light that provided just enough illumination to navigate by. Behind them, they could hear the guards attempting to follow, armored bodies scraping against stone, voices echoing through the passages. Their bulkier equipment was hindering them in the confined space, buying Kalen and Lyranaya precious time. The tunnel system became increasingly complex, branching in multiple directions. Lyranaya chose their path with measured confidence, using subtle air currents and the patterns of crystal growth as guides. Kalen struggled to keep pace, his injured leg threatening to buckle with each step. After what felt like hours of descent, they emerged into a vast underground chamber that took their breath away. The ceiling soared at least 30 meters above them, entirely covered in luminescent crystals that bathed the space in soft, shifting light. The chamber floor was dominated by a lake of perfectly clear water, steam rising gently from its surface. A geothermal spring, Lyranaya said in wonder. I've heard of these in old texts, but never seen one. The water's edge was ringed with mineral deposits that had formed into terraced pools of varying sizes. The air was warm and carried a slight mineral scent, but not unpleasant. We need to keep moving, Kalen said through gritted teeth, though the sight was indeed magnificent. No, Lyranaya countered. We need to treat your wound, and... She cocked her head, listening intently. I think we've lost them for now. The tunnels are too complex. She helped him to the edge of one of the smaller pools. These waters have healing properties. The minerals can help stabilize tissue until your enhancements complete their work. With her assistance, Kalen removed his boot and rolled up the torn fabric of his pants leg. The plasma burn was ugly, a deep, charred furrow along his outer thigh. In a normal human, it would have been debilitating, possibly fatal without immediate medical attention. His enhanced healing had already stopped the bleeding and begun regenerating tissue, but the process was far from complete. Carefully, he lowered the injured leg into the pool. The mineral-rich water sent an immediate sensation of warmth through the damaged tissue. Not the searing pain he expected, but a gentle heat that seemed to penetrate deep into the muscle. "Rest," Lyranaya instructed. "I'll secure the perimeter and see if there are other exits." While she explored the chamber, Kalen leaned back against the smooth stone, allowing his body to focus its resources on healing. The warm water and something in the minerals seemed to accelerate the process. By the time Lyranaya returned, the wound had already formed a layer of new tissue. "There's another tunnel on the far side," she reported, kneeling beside him to examine his leg. "It appears to lead upward. If my sense of direction is correct, it might bring us out near the mining operations of Crimson Outpost. And our pursuers? No sign yet, but they'll find this chamber eventually. How soon can you move?" Kalen tested the leg, wincing slightly. "Give me an hour. The healing is progressing faster than expected." Lyranaya nodded. "We'll rest, then. Conserve strength for the final push." She settled beside him at the pool's edge, finally allowing herself to drink from the clear water. In the peaceful glow of the crystal cavern, a comfortable silence fell between them. Kalen found himself studying Lyranaya's profile, the elegant lines of her facial structure, the subtle patterns of her bioluminescent markings, now glowing a calm blue. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for coming back for me." At the fissure, she turned to him, her expression softening. "As you said earlier, we're in this together now. Still, you could have continued alone. Better chances. Perhaps." She looked out across the underground lake. "Or perhaps I've learned something these past days. About honor. About worth beyond titles and victories." From a primitive human, he asked with a hint of humor. Her markings flashed briefly with amusement. From an equal, the word hung in the air between them, carrying weight neither had anticipated. Slowly, hesitantly, Lyranaya's hand moved to rest upon his, an unprecedented gesture of connection between their species. Her skin was cooler than human temperature, smooth with a faint texture like fine suede. "If we survive this," she said softly, "perhaps we find our new paths together." Before Kalen could respond, a distant sound echoed through the chamber, the unmistakable clatter of armored boots on stone. The elite guards had found them. "Time to go," Lyranaya said, instantly alert. She helped Kalen to his feet, his injured leg, now supporting weight though still painful. They moved swiftly across the chamber toward the exit tunnel she had discovered, staying low and using the natural formations as cover. Behind them, voices echoed, orders being given, positions coordinated. The guards had entered the chamber but hadn't spotted them yet. The exit tunnel was narrower than the one they had entered through, forcing them to proceed single file. Lyranaya led the way, her natural night vision guiding them through sections where the crystal illumination faded. Kalen followed, grimacing with each step but moving steadily. The tunnel curved upward, becoming steeper. In places, they had to use natural handholds to climb near vertical sections. Kalen's injured leg protested, but the hour of rest and healing had done enough to make progress possible. Behind them, they could hear the guards entering the tunnel, their heavier armor scraping against stone. "They're gaining," Kalen observed during a brief pause on a ledge. "We're close to the surface," Lyranaya replied. "I can smell fresh air." They continued their ascent with renewed urgency. The tunnel grew brighter as they progressed, natural light filtering down from above. Finally, they emerged onto a rocky slope overlooking a vast mining operation. Massive excavators and processing structures sprawled across the volcanic landscape, with a makeshift settlement of buildings constructed from prefabricated units and repurposed spacecraft parts. Crimson Outpost, Lyranaya confirmed, pointing to the settlement. Now we just need to reach it before they catch us. The slope provided some cover, large boulders and scraggly vegetation that had adapted to the mineral-rich soil. They made their way downward as quickly as Kalen's injury would allow. Behind them, they heard the first of the elite guards emerging from the tunnel. There they are, a voice shouted in Xylosian. Plasma fire erupted, bolts striking the rocks around them. Run! Kalen pushed Lyranaya ahead of him. Don't stop. They abandoned all pretense of stealth, racing down the slope toward the outpost. Plasma bolts continued to rain around them, the guards spreading out to establish firing positions. One bolt struck particularly close, the concussion wave sending Kalen stumbling to one knee. Lyranaya stopped, turning back to help him. Leave me, he shouted. Get to the outpost. Instead, she grabbed his arm, hauling him upright with surprising strength. Together, she insisted. We finish this together. The guards were closing the distance rapidly, their superior position on the slope giving them a clear advantage. Kalen knew they wouldn't make it to the outpost before being overtaken. A decision formed in his mind, desperate, possibly suicidal, but their only chance. The processing plant, he gasped, pointing to a large structure about 200 meters ahead, much closer than the main settlement. If we can reach it, we can use the machinery for cover. Lyranaya understood immediately. They changed course, heading directly for the industrial complex of conveyor systems, crushing equipment, and separation tanks. As they approached, Kalen saw workers, a mix of Xylosians and other species, stopping to stare at the unfolding drama. Help! Lyranaya called out in trade language. Political refugees seeking asylum. Whether from sympathy or simply the disruption to their routine, several workers moved toward them, providing momentary confusion that slowed the pursuing guards' fire. Kalen and Lyranaya reached the first of the processing equipment, a massive sorting conveyor currently inactive. This way, Kalen directed, pulling Lyranaya behind the machine's control housing. The guards had reached the perimeter of the facility and were spreading out to surround them. We're trapped, Lyranaya observed, checking the charge on their remaining plasma rifle. Low power, maybe 3 shots left. Kalen scanned their surroundings with tactical precision. The processing plant was designed to extract and refine the crystalline minerals they had seen throughout the ashlands. Massive hoppers fed raw material onto conveyor systems that ran through various crushing and separation processes. Nearby, a control station housed the facility's operational systems. An idea formed, dangerous, but their options were dwindling rapidly. Cover me, he told Lyranaya. I need to reach that control station. She nodded grimly, raising the rifle. On 3. 1, 2, 3. She fired precisely, forcing the nearest guards to take cover. Kalen sprinted for the control station, ignoring the screaming pain in his injured leg. Plasma bolts impacted around him, one so close he felt its heat through his clothes. He reached the station and dove inside, finding it mercifully empty, the operators having fled when the shooting started. The control panels were labeled in Xylosian, but the industrial systems followed logical patterns he could decipher. Working swiftly, he activated the main processing line. Conveyors whirred to life, crushing mechanisms engaged with deafening noise. Separation systems began cycling. The cacophony of industrial machinery provided instant acoustic cover. Outside, Lyranaya was pinned down behind a hopper, the guards closing in from multiple directions. Her rifle was depleted, reduced to a makeshift club at best. Kalen analyzed the control systems, looking for anything that could help. His eyes settled on the emergency protocols, specifically the mineral wash system used to clear blockages. If he could override the safety interlocks. With quick, precise movements, he bypassed the key safety systems and rerouted the high-pressure mineral wash to the external holding tanks. A warning klaxon began to sound, but was largely drowned out by the machinery noise. Kalen sprinted back to Lyranaya's position. When I give the signal, run for the settlement, he shouted over the industrial din. Don't stop. Don't look back. What are you doing? She demanded. Creating a distraction. He pointed to a massive pipe running overhead, now vibrating ominously as pressure built within it. Understanding dawned in her eyes. The safety systems. Bypassed. Now move. They broke cover together, running in a zigzag pattern to avoid plasma fire. Kalen's enhanced vision tracked the guards' positions, 6 of them, spread in a semicircle, gradually tightening the noose. Just as the lead guard raised his weapon for a clear shot, Kalen triggered the emergency release. The pipe overhead ruptured with explosive force, releasing a torrent of superheated, mineral-laden water that engulfed the entire area. Guards were knocked off their feet by the deluge. Visibility instantly reduced to 0 in the resulting cloud of steam and mineral dust. Now, Kalen grabbed Lyrania's hand, and they ran blindly through the chaos toward where they knew the settlement lay. The ground was slick with mineral slurry, making each step treacherous. Behind them, they could hear the guards shouting in confusion, trying to re-establish coordination amidst the blinding steam cloud. The industrial disaster was escalating, secondary systems failing as the initial rupture triggered a cascade of malfunctions. They emerged from the steam cloud to find themselves at the edge of Crimson Outpost proper, a chaotic collection of structures ranging from prefabricated habitation units to repurposed shuttle components. Workers and residents were running toward the processing plant, shouting about the emergency. This way, Lyrania urged, pulling Kalen down a narrow alley between structures. We need to find the independent operators. They navigated the labyrinthine settlement, putting distance between themselves and the pursuing guards. Kalen's leg was failing rapidly now, the enhanced healing unable to keep pace with the renewed strain. Lyrania supported him, her strength surprising for her slender frame. Eventually, they reached what appeared to be a trading hub, a circular plaza surrounded by various businesses catering to off-world visitors. Lyrania approached a weathered structure with a sign in multiple languages advertising interstellar transport. Inside, they found a dimly lit office occupied by a massive, reptilian being with scarred scales and cybernetic enhancements. It regarded them with obvious suspicion, yellow eyes narrowing at their bedraggled appearance. We need passage off-world, Lyrania stated without preamble. Immediately. Payment, the being rumbled in accented trade language. Lyrania hesitated. They had nothing of value. No currency, no tradable goods. Information, Kalen interjected, leaning heavily against the counter. About Xylosian military movements. Security protocols. Intelligence valuable to independent operators. The reptilian's interest visibly sharpened. What makes this information worth my risk? She's a former military intelligence operative, Kalen continued, and a disgraced arena champion with intimate knowledge of high governance security. The being studied Lyrania more carefully, recognition dawning in its ancient eyes. The blue champion. Your face was on broadcast streams. It chuckled, a sound like rocks grinding together. Now you run with a human. Interesting times. Can you help us? Lyrania pressed. Perhaps. The reptilian activated a terminal, checking something. Transport arriving tomorrow. Bound for the fringe worlds. No questions asked if the information is valuable enough. It is, Lyrania assured it. And we have combat skills to offer as well, if security is needed. The being considered this, then nodded slowly. Safe house and back. Rest there until transport arrives. We discuss specifics later. They were led to a small, spartanly furnished room behind the office, little more than a storage space converted for occasional use. A single cot, a water dispenser, and a waste reclamation unit were the only amenities. As the door closed behind them, Kalen finally allowed himself to collapse onto the cot, his injured leg no longer able to support his weight. Lyrania immediately examined the wound, which had reopened during their desperate flight. It needs proper medical attention, she said, concern evident in her voice. It'll hold until we're off-world. He managed a pained smile. Enhanced healing, remember? She found basic medical supplies in a wall cabinet and set about cleaning and binding the wound. Her touch was gentle but efficient, the motions practiced. "You're good at this," Kalen observed. "Field medicine was part of intelligence training," she replied, securing the bandage. "Though I admit, human physiology presents new challenges." When she finished, she sat beside him on the edge of the cot. For a moment, they simply existed in shared silence, the weight of their journey settling around them. "We made it," Kalen said finally. "Almost," Lyranaya corrected. "We're not off-planet yet. Do you trust our scaly friend out there?" She considered the question. Trust is a luxury in the fringe, but self-interest is reliable. The information we can provide is valuable enough to ensure cooperation. Kalen nodded, then winced as pain shot through his leg. "What happens after we leave Xylos? Where will you go?" "I haven't thought that far ahead," she admitted. "Survival has consumed all planning capacity." "We could stay together," Kalen suggested, his voice carefully neutral. "Pool our resources, our skills. We make a good team." Lyranaya's markings shifted to a warm purple he hadn't seen before. "We do." She paused, choosing her words deliberately. "When I entered the arena that day, I saw you as merely a primitive creature beneath contempt. You won't last a minute against me. Human, I said. I remember," Kalen smiled faintly. "I was wrong. Not just about your capabilities, but about what you are." Her hand found his again, cool fingers intertwining with warm ones. "Perhaps that is the greatest lesson of this journey. That understanding requires more than observation from a position of presumed superiority." "That's a very philosophical take on getting your ass kicked," Kalen teased. She laughed, a genuine sound of amusement that transformed her features. "Indeed, though I would phrase it as a temporary tactical setback, rather than getting my ass kicked." Their shared laughter faded into comfortable silence. Outside, they could hear the sounds of the settlement. Voices in various languages, machinery, the occasional rumble of a transport vehicle. Normal life, continuing despite the drama of their escape. "Rest," Lyranaya instructed, rising from the cot. "I'll keep watch. Your body needs to heal." Despite his fatigue, Kalen reached for her hand. "Stay," he said simply. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded and settled beside him again. "Until you sleep." Sleep came quickly, his enhanced body directing all resources to healing. His last conscious thought was of Lyranaya's cool hand in his, a bridge between worlds that had seemed impossibly distant just days ago. He dreamed of Earth, of green fields and blue skies so different from the alien landscape of Xylos. Yet in this dream, Lyranaya walked beside him, her azure skin and bioluminescent markings somehow belonging in this terrestrial setting. They stood atop a hill, looking out over a planet that belonged to neither of them exclusively, yet welcomed both. Kalen woke to the sound of voices, hushed but urgent, coming from the main office. Lyranaya was already alert, positioned near the door, listening intently. "Trouble," he whispered, sitting up carefully. His leg felt remarkably better, still painful, but the enhanced healing had made significant progress during his rest. "Possibly," she replied softly. "Elite guards have entered the settlement, conducting a building-by-building search." "How long was I asleep?" "About 6 hours. Our transport isn't due until tomorrow morning." Kalen tested his weight on the injured leg. He could stand, though not without pain. "Options? Limited. This building has no rear exit. The only way out is through the main office." She glanced at him appraisingly. "Can you fight if necessary?" "If necessary," he confirmed. "Preferably not 6 elite guards at once." Her markings flickered with what he now recognized as wry amusement. "Agreed." The voices in the front office grew louder. One was their reptilian host. The others were unmistakably Xylosian military, clipped, formal tones demanding information. "They're searching the building," Lyranaya whispered. "Prepare yourself." They positioned themselves on either side of the door, Kalen on the side with the hinges, Lyranaya opposite. The wound in his leg protested, but adrenaline and enhanced physiology kept him focused. They had no weapons beyond their bare hands and whatever they could improvise from the sparse furnishings. The voices in the front office reached a crescendo, then fell, suddenly silent. Footsteps approached their hiding place. Kalen tensed, preparing to strike. The door swung open, and their reptilian host entered alone, closing the door quickly behind itself. 6 guards outside, it rasped quietly, searching every building in this sector. They have your descriptions. Can you get us out? Lyranaya asked. Perhaps. The reptilian's yellow eyes gleamed with calculation. There is a maintenance tunnel beneath this building, connecting to the settlement's waste reclamation system. It leads to the landing pads. Unpleasant but effective. And in exchange? Kalen asked, knowing nothing came freely in the fringe. Information now, not later. The reptilian produced a small data crystal. Security protocols, military response patterns, identification codes. Everything promised. Lyranaya took the crystal without hesitation. I'll need access to your terminal. The reptilian led them back into the main office, which was now empty of visitors. Lyranaya seated herself at the terminal and began transferring information to the data crystal with practiced efficiency, her fingers dancing across the unfamiliar interface as if she'd used it all her life. 5 minutes, she murmured, eyes fixed on the scrolling data. This system is archaic. Guards will return to this sector within 15. The reptilian informed them, monitoring something on a separate display. They're being thorough. Kalen positioned himself near the window, carefully peering out without disturbing the covering. The settlement continued its normal activities, but he could see the tension, residents moving with heightened awareness, conversations halting when armored figures passed. Almost done, Lyranaya reported. Her markings had dimmed to near invisibility, a state of deep concentration. A commotion outside drew Kalen's attention. A group of elite guards had surrounded a figure several buildings away. A tall, lean Xylosian who bore a passing resemblance to Lyranaya in build and coloration. They're detaining someone, he reported quietly. Mistaken identity. It won't fool them for long, the reptilian rumbled. Hurry. Lyranaya completed the data transfer and handed the crystal to their host. Everything is promised. Now the tunnel. The reptilian examined the crystal briefly, then nodded in satisfaction. It moved to a far corner of the office and shifted a heavy storage unit, revealing a hatch in the floor. Follow this to Junction 7, then take the eastern branch. It will lead to maintenance access beneath the landing pads. Wait until the transport arrives at dawn. Thank you, Kalen said simply. The reptilian made a dismissive gesture. Business transaction, nothing more. Now go, before they return. Lyranaya descended first, disappearing into the darkness below. Kalen followed more awkwardly, his injured leg making the climb down the access ladder challenging. The reptilians sealed the hatch behind them, leaving them in near-total darkness broken only by the faint glow of Lyranaya's markings. Can you see? She asked. Enhanced vision, he reminded her. It's not perfect, but I can make out shapes and movement. The tunnel was exactly as advertised, a maintenance access for the settlement's waste reclamation system. The smell was pungent but bearable, the space confining but navigable. They moved as quickly as Kalen's injury would allow, following the reptilian's directions. Junction 7 should be ahead, Lyranaya said after about 20 minutes of careful progress. They reached an intersection where multiple tunnels converged. Crude markings on the wall confirmed they had found the correct junction. The eastern branch, as indicated, led gently upward. This should take us to the landing pads, Kalen observed. They continued in silence, conserving energy and remaining alert for any signs of pursuit. The tunnel gradually improved in condition, transitioning from crude excavation to more structured engineering as they approached the critical infrastructure of the spaceport. Eventually, they reached another access hatch. According to their directions, this would open into a maintenance bay beneath the landing pads. Lyranaya climbed the ladder first, carefully testing the hatch. Locked from the outside, she reported. Can you bypass it? Perhaps. She examined the mechanism in the dim light of her own bioluminescence. Basic mechanical system. Nothing sophisticated. Working by feel, she manipulated the locking mechanism, listening for the subtle clicks that indicated progress. After several tense minutes, there was a definitive clunk. "Got it," she whispered, satisfaction evident in her voice. She pushed the hatch open a fraction, peering out to assess their situation. After a moment, she opened it fully and climbed out. Kalen followed, finding himself in a dimly lit maintenance area beneath a massive landing pad structure. The air smelled of fuel and hot metal, a welcome change from the tunnel. "The transport arrives at dawn," Lyranaya said, checking an environmental readout on the wall. 4 hours from now. So we wait. Kalen settled against a support column, stretching his injured leg. The wound was healing remarkably well, but fatigue was setting in. Even enhanced physiology had limits. Lyranaya joined him, their shoulders touching as they leaned against the column. Above them, the occasional rumble of equipment and footsteps indicated the spaceport's continuous operation, even during the night cycle. "What will you tell your people when you return?" she asked after a comfortable silence. "About Xylos. About me." Kalen considered the question. "The truth, or part of it. That Xylos is more complex than our intelligence suggested. That not all Xylosians support the high governance's policies." He glanced at her profile, illuminated by her own subtle glow. "That I met someone who changed how I see your species. And if they ask you to return as an operative, to use what you've learned against Xylos, I would refuse," he said simply. "Some boundaries can't be uncrossed." Her markings shifted to that warm purple again, a color he was beginning to associate with emotional openness. "I find myself facing similar questions. My knowledge of Xylosian security would be valuable to many powers in the galaxy. Using it would be a betrayal of my people, even if those same people have declared me an enemy. There are other paths," Kalen suggested. "Our experience could help build understanding between our species, rather than further conflict." "The diplomat speaks," she said with gentle teasing. "Though perhaps that was your true purpose all along, beneath the combat enhancements." "Perhaps." He smiled. "Or perhaps near-death experiences have made me philosophical." They fell silent again, each lost in private contemplation of possible futures. Gradually, Kalen felt Lyranaya's weight settle more fully against him as she drifted into sleep, a profound gesture of trust from a warrior species. He remained alert, keeping watch while she rested. The hours passed quietly. Occasionally, Kalen heard distant voices or the heavy tread of boots that might have been searching guards, but none approached their hiding place. As dawn neared, the activity above them increased. Cargo being moved, equipment powered up, voices calling instructions. Lyranaya woke instantly at his touch, transitioning from sleep to full alertness without the grogginess humans experienced. "Time," she asked. "Almost dawn," he confirmed. The transport should arrive soon. They moved to a position with a better view of the landing pad access, careful to remain hidden. Through a maintenance grate, they could see the main pad, a circular expanse of heat-resistant material currently empty of vessels. Workers moved about preparing for arrivals, checking equipment and securing cargo. A low rumble announced the approach of a ship. The workers cleared the pad as landing lights activated automatically. A vessel descended through the early morning haze, a mid-sized transport of mixed origin design, showing the modifications and repairs typical of independent operators. It settled onto the pad with practiced precision, landing struts absorbing the impact. "That's our ride," Kalen said. "Now we just need to get aboard without being seen." They watched as the ship's loading ramp extended and crew members emerged, a mix of species typical of fringe operations. Cargo began moving both on and off the vessel under the supervision of port authorities and ship's officers. There, Lyranaya pointed to a maintenance access panel on the underside of the ship, currently open as technicians performed routine checks. "If we time it right, we could enter through there when the technicians finish. And once aboard, find somewhere to hide until departure. Then make ourselves known to the captain, preferably when we're already in transit." It wasn't an elegant plan, but Kalen had to admit it was their best option. They waited patiently as the loading and inspection processes continued. Eventually, The technicians completed their work on the underside access and moved to another section of the ship. Now, Lyranaya whispered. They moved swiftly from their hiding place, trying to look like part of the legitimate port operations as they approached the vessel. Kalen's leg protested, but held as they crossed the exposed section of the pad. They reached the underside of the ship without drawing attention. The maintenance access panel was still partially open. Lyranaya slipped through first, her slender form easily navigating the tight space. Kalen followed with more difficulty, his broader shoulders and injured leg making the awkward entry challenging. Inside, they found themselves in a cramped maintenance crawlway designed for accessing the ship's lower systems. Pipes and conduits ran along the walls and ceiling, limiting headroom to the point where they had to crouch walk. This way, Lyranaya whispered, leading them deeper into the vessel's infrastructure. We need to find somewhere less traffic to hide. They navigated the maintenance passages carefully, freezing whenever they heard voices or footsteps nearby. The ship was busy with pre-departure activities, crew moving throughout to secure cargo and prepare systems. After several tense minutes, they found what appeared to be a storage area for emergency equipment, survival gear, repair kits, and environmental suits packed into wall recesses. The space was tight, but offered concealment behind stacked containers. This should work, Kalen said as they wedged themselves into the hiding spot. Once we're in space, we can approach the captain. No sooner had they settled than the ship's engines began powering up, a deep vibration that resonated through the hull. Announcements in several languages echoed through the internal communication system, instructing crew to prepare for departure. Perfect timing, Lyranaya observed. Her markings had shifted to a cautious yellow-green, alert but optimistic. The launch sequence proceeded smoothly. They felt the moment the ship broke contact with the landing pad, the subtle shift in gravity as it ascended. Minutes later came the more pronounced sensation of acceleration as the vessel gained altitude and speed, pushing them deeper into their hiding place. They remained silent throughout. The process, knowing that detection before achieving orbit could result in forced return to Xylos. Eventually, the acceleration eased as the ship reached its cruising velocity. The vibration of the engines settled into a steady rhythm that suggested normal space travel. We should be clear of Xylos' orbit by now, Kalen said after consulting his internal chronometer, another enhancement he was still discovering. Time to introduce ourselves to the captain. They carefully extracted themselves from their hiding place. Kalen's leg had stiffened during the wait, but the pain had diminished significantly. His enhanced healing was working remarkably well given the circumstances. They found their way to a main corridor, earning startled looks from crew members they encountered. Rather than attempting to explain themselves to subordinates, they asked directly for the captain's location and were directed, with obvious suspicion, to the command deck. The command deck was a practical, utilitarian space with none of the sleek design aesthetics of military vessels. Multiple species worked at various stations, monitoring the ship's functions with professional efficiency. At the center, in a raised chair designed to accommodate their massive frame, sat another of the reptilian species they had dealt with at Crimson Outpost, possibly a relative, given the similar scale patterns. The captain's yellow eyes narrowed at their unauthorized appearance, but there was no immediate hostility. Stowaways, the captain observed in the same rumbling accent as their previous reptilian contact. Expensive ones, judging by your descriptions. We arranged passage with your associate on Xylos, Lyranaya explained. Circumstances forced in unconventional boarding. Zarth mentioned possibilities, the captain replied. Also mentioned payment. Information, Kalen confirmed. And our services if needed. The captain studied them thoughtfully, clawed fingers tapping on the armrest. Information has been received. Services remain to be evaluated. For now, you will be guests. Restricted access, monitored movements. Acceptable. Kalen and Lyranaya exchanged glances, then nodded in unison. Acceptable. Lyranaya answered for both of them. Good. The captain gestured to a crew member. Show them to guest quarters. Basic amenities, no communications access. Medical attention for the human's injury. As they were led away, Kalen caught the captain's parting comment. Interesting times indeed, when champions fall and species lines blur. The guest quarters were Spartan but comfortable. A small cabin with basic sleeping platforms, hygiene facilities, and a food synthesizer program for multiple species requirements. A medic visited shortly after they were settled, treating Kalen's leg with more advanced techniques than had been available on the run. Within hours, the wound was properly sealed and well on its way to complete healing. Left alone, they finally had time to process the magnitude of what they had accomplished and what lay ahead. "We escaped," Kalen said, testing his newly treated leg by pacing the small cabin. "Actually escaped. For now, Lyranaya qualified. Varric is not likely to abandon the pursuit easily. His pride is wounded, and he clearly fears what you might know about Xylosian operations. Let him search. This ship is headed to the fringe worlds, beyond Xylosian jurisdiction." True. She settled onto one of the sleeping platforms, her posture relaxing for perhaps the first time since they had met. "Freedom of a sort awaits us. Of a sort. We are alive but displaced. Neither of us can return to our former lives." Her markings shifted to a thoughtful blue. "We must create new ones." Kalen sat beside her, their shoulders touching lightly. Together, she turned to face him fully, her expression more open than he had ever seen it. "I would prefer that," she said simply. "As would I." He took her hand, the gesture now familiar and comfortable between them. "We have skills, knowledge. We can find our place. Perhaps as mediators," she suggested, "between our species. There are diplomatic corps in the fringe that specialize in cross-cultural navigation, using our understanding of both worlds to build bridges rather than weapons." Kalen nodded. "I like that vision." A comfortable silence fell between them. Through the small viewport in their cabin, the stars streaked by, each one a potential destination, a possible future. The uncertainty that lay ahead was daunting, but also exhilarating in its freedom. "I never imagined this outcome when I stepped into the arena," Lyranaya said softly. "When I mocked you, saying you wouldn't last a minute against me." "Life has a way of appending our certainties," Kalen replied, "especially our arrogant ones." Her markings flashed briefly with amusement. "Indeed." She leaned against him more deliberately, her cooler body temperature a pleasant contrast to his human warmth. "Perhaps that is the true lesson of our journey. That certainty is an illusion, and adaptation is strength." "Now who's being philosophical?" he teased. As the ship carried them deeper into space, away from Xylos and toward the fringe worlds with their boundless possibilities, Kalen reflected on the extraordinary sequence of events that had led them here. From mortal enemies to reluctant allies to something deeper, a connection that transcended species and circumstance. Lyranaya's mocking words in the arena, "You won't last a minute against me, human," had indeed been paid for in heartbeat, but not with his death, as she had intended. Rather, with the death of her arrogance and the birth of something neither of them could have anticipated. A partnership forged in adversity, tempered by shared danger, and now opening into possibilities limited only by their courage to explore them. The stars continued their silent passage outside the viewport, witnesses to a new beginning. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as they had faced all others since that fateful moment in the arena, together.